What may be an idea of the self as it inhabits this world that we can share or make common between us as we begin this half hour or so of conversation? In every life, at each moment, that is, at each point in each of our lives, there is a pressure that exerts itself to create multiple lines in ourself. Tendencies, we could call them. Some of these lines get expressed, some become manifest, and others become visible. But there are still other lines, more lines. That is, possibilities of the self. How may these be expressed? For that, perhaps, we have to think a little about what this pressure is which operates. Is it generative? Is it productive? Is it reactive? Is it refractive? Or are all these pressures operative at every point in life? There are stabilizing and fixing languages of identity and condition, which provide easy lenses through which it is possible to bring into language some already formed lines. But what about all the other lines of the self that are probable, possible, multiple, in formation, not yet expressed, but present still? To be able to recognize a force in every particle, at every moment, and to be able to express it, bring it into language, would be a joyful thought. The Cybermohalla Ensemble, from within whose reflections I just entered this conversation, and from whose questions and practices I am going to speak today, is a Delhi-based collective of 10 practitioners and writers. Azra Tabassum, Shamsher Ali, Love Anand, Neelofar, Lakshmi Kohli, Babli Rai, Nasreen, Janu Nagar, Rabia Qureshi, and Rakesh Khairalia. The ensemble has emerged from the project Cybermohalla, which comprised a network of dispersed labs for experimentation and exploration among young people in different working-class neighborhoods of Delhi, and was initiated by Sarai CSDS and the NGO Ankur in 2001. Over the years, close to 500 people passed through the Cybermohalla labs. The network has produced a broad range of materials, practices, works, and structures. Cybermohalla's work has appeared in online journals, radio broadcasts, printed publications, neighborhood gatherings, and exhibitions of contemporary and new media art. The Cybermohalla Ensemble and their peers at the lab have published a number of books too, the most notable of which is a book about Delhi, part fictive, part documentary, called Behrupiya Sheher in Hindi. Its English translation, Trickster City, was brought out by Penguin India in 2010. A new book is forthcoming from Sternberg, called Cybermohalla Hub. This book is about architecture, and in it, the ensemble, along with the Frankfurt-based architects Michel Muller and Nicholas Hirsch, lay out an imaginary of a building as an invitation to being and thinking together. For this book, the ensemble proposed investigations, propositions, and speculations, which they sent to people they have been in dialogue with, artists, poets, writers, architects, philosophers, urbanists, to elicit their responses and elaboration. The ensemble's writings, drawings, and images, the images and writings they received in response to these, the architectural drawings of the building developed by Nicholas and Michel in collaboration with the ensemble over 4 years, as well as images of 1:1 prototypes of the building exhibited in different art contexts all over the world, are all woven together in this book. I'm Shveta Sarda. I live in Delhi, and I've been with the Cybermohalla Ensemble for 10 years. As someone who remains in dialogue with them, edits, translates between Hindi and English, listens into, chronicles, and sometimes initiates the innumerable processes the ensemble generates and is part of. Today, in the context of learning environments, I would like to focus on a small book, a text and image constellation brought out by the ensemble earlier this year. It's called No Apologies for the Interruption and is available for free download at sarai.net. The decade of the 90s saw an explosion of digital media and technologies in Delhi. The digital opened an expansive generative space for sharing, linking, accessing, and transmitting the values of re-engineering and reordering cultural materials. Over the last decade, there has been a lively debate around pirate economies in South Asian cities. The book, No Apologies for the Interruption, is a specific contribution to and intervention in this debate. It takes the richness and density of the media environments in various localities within which this economy is enmeshed as its starting point. It inquires into the potential, the spirit of I can, which both animate this media environment and also produce fresh possibilities of the self through them by creating new routes of knowledge which exist parallel to the established routes of knowledge circulation. This book makes its argument through weaving together personas with technological and material contexts. Concepts to understand the expanse of the media environments and the subjectivities unfolding within them come from acts of individuals and their dexterity with digital technologies, which range from formats in which cultural materials travel through data routes to the physical, material forms of the neighborhoods where they are sustained and they grow. A concept that emerges as an attempt to understand and express how people make life with each other as a locality begins to be formed and take shape becomes invaluable to understanding the very question of the possibility of intellectual life that we, all of us, make with each other. Through a text in which the ensemble describes a square formed between two intersecting streets where people meet for some time as they pass between work and home at the end of each day, this concept is significant for understanding the possibilities within environments. And I quote, "The magic chair," the ensemble writes, "is a condition everyone carries in them. It's a matter of its activation. How to build an environment around us that can bring the highest level of activation of this magic chair. In daily life, the place of the magic chair diminishes or expands depending on what and who it encounters. What can or do we create around ourselves? In what ways can we enter that which has been made by others around us so that an activation and expansion of the magic chair may happen in and around us?" Thinking about the magic chair, legal scholar Lawrence Liang and longtime companion of the ensemble proposes in a recent essay in the Efflux Journal the idea of a pirate sense of world making. He writes, "I would suggest that one could extend the idea of the hope sense into other domains rarely articulated as belonging to that of the senses or sensibility, engulfed as they are by their legal status. How, for instance, might we think of a pirate sense? Like a hope sense, this is not a foregrounded sense, but a subterranean one, flying just below the radar of visible and the audible, but ever alert to the possibilities offered in spite of the apparent impossibility of our material life." End of quote. Pirate sense then acts on the world to create its own possibilities from the given materials of culture, technology, and infrastructure. It does not wait, nor does it defer its creative life to a future moment. Here I would like to introduce the figure of the autodidact as an embodiment of this pirate sense. I would like to read a text from the book, no apologies. For background, the video parlor being referred to in this text is a low-resource lending store in a neighborhood, one of many that thrive all over Delhi, through the downloading of BitTorrents and copying of CDs, and which find their sustenance through lateral connections and grey market economies. Nandu, the young man who will be referred to, is a figure in this media environment, someone who has not only self-learned how to be in it, but who also lives the fluidity of this environment and what it makes possible for all of us. It is their affinity towards him that attracted the Cybermohalla Ensemble to engage with him and to write through him. There is more about him in the book, but I'm reading here only a part of it. A group of us, my friends and I, had been downloading and watching films for some time now. After a while, we thought, let's try and think of other films, books, stories, questions that build on the films we have been watching and extend our resources in this way. I headed for Nandu's video parlor, thinking I could perhaps begin another conversation with him. Nandu's father was leaving just as I entered his shop. I said to Nandu, "I would love to narrate to your father the story of this movie called Blade Runner I saw recently. What happens if a human body with a robotic brain starts feeling emotions like a human being? In the movie, people found it too dangerous. They started looking for all such bodies. They were called replicants, and their hunters were called Blade Runners. A male Blade Runner kisses a replicant who has a woman's body and then asks the replicant to kiss him back. It was a 5-minute-long kiss, and I'm sure your father would object to it very much. He'd think it indecent." Nandu looked at me curiously for some time. Then he said, "So that's what you think my father's question would be. But what's your own question in this?" I sensed Nandu was thinking I too had concentrated on the kiss after all. I said, to me, there is a deep question there about what it means to be human, or when we become human. I'm looking for resources around this question which arises for me from watching Blade Runner. After a few seconds' reflection, Nandu turned towards a shelf and pulled out a CD. Here, he said, watch this film, Mithya. Mithya means lies. It's a Hindi film directed by Rajat Kapoor, came out a few years ago. Here, he said, watch this film, Mithya. Maybe you'll find something that resonates with your question. That's when I realized yet again something about Nandu. He was someone who had kept a dialogue on with me in his head. That was why he kept a challenging relationship with me, always. Here I would like us to consider 2 points that characterize the autodidact. 1, it's someone who doesn't work through the partitions of work time, leisure time, who breaks these partitions through how he or she is. And 2, it's someone who breaks the circuit of knowledge mobilities, creating his or her own circuits, unpredictable and unafraid of creating routes which are not from within the established routes of ideas and image of thought. It is when we think through the autodidact's engagement with materials and time that we touch the question of re-engineering and the mode in which technical knowledge is made your own. I take you through a dialogue, again from No Apologies. His name is Manan. He has been repairing TVs and radios for the last 30 years. He said, I have done repairing work ever since I started working, since around 1980. I worked in Govindpuri for 2 years. Govindpuri is a neighborhood in Delhi. Then I worked in Madangir, then Malviya Nagar, then Garhi, then different areas around Badarpur, in different shops. Before I began working in this shop, I worked in the shop that's next to this shop. I started working here in 1984 and have been here since then. It was mostly radios before 1984. Everyone used to roam about listening to radios. At best, radio sets used to require sound parts to be repaired. For instance, connecting small speakers to the radio set. In my 2 years at Govindpuri, as I had learned sufficiently, I used to teach the newer artisans who came to work there. We used to distribute the minor works among these new artisans. The rest of the work the owner used to do on his own. And by being with him, I learned that work too. We asked, what kind of preparation is required in leaving one place of work and going to another place of work? How does one discern, I have learned enough and I am now ready to move on to the next level? Manan said, in the old place, you'd be doing one kind of repair work. In that new place, you'll get newer kinds of work to do, over and above what you already know. And then, as you know, repair work keeps increasing. As time goes on, more and more things require repairing. Earlier radios used to have a tube component, which one doesn't see any longer. Then transistors came. Then sets which had ICs came. Today, sets come with ICs, CD cards. Electronic items have kept changing with time, and work too has changed, even the smallest of works. Earlier technology used to be big, but now when it is smaller, it has become easier and possible to share. When one works, one sees changes, and one's curiosity also keeps increasing. One waits for new things to come, but one also watches out when new things come. About things which you feel are beyond you, you ask people who know more than you. In this way, you create a relationship with them in which they share what they know with you, which is important for us. We are the ones who benefit in this, because it is our knowledge which keeps increasing in such a relationship. No one knows everything. Everyone has to take someone's help at some point of time or another. Everyone, from a small helper to a big master. Text ends. Being able to share one's curiosity, searching a space, desiring friendships, needing listeners, exploring, being with others, as well as seeking solitude. These conditions of life are the conditions too of intellectual and creative life. They are the impulses with which the autodidact wanders through and creates her paths in the streets of the digital. As the ensemble writes, to be a drifter, to be a wanderer, to be lost, to find paths away, the heart is always in search of something else, something apart, something more. This is a small book. A reader could approach this book in many ways. One way would be to read it as a book about another place, a travelogue, perhaps. A book is always good for that. This book is also something that can be used as a tool. To see, for instance, the range of materials to repurpose, recraft, reconstitute. Photographs, drawings, texts, maps, extracts from teaching charts, the kind found in classrooms that teach students about tools, morality, fruits and vegetables, and also miscellaneous web downloads. In that sense, this is a book of practices, a thing or two we do with each other. Consider, for instance, the rescripting of a scene from a movie. In rescripting, within the limits of the frame provided by the stills or grabs taken from a movie, new dialogues and scripts are reconstituted. The scene may have been downloaded from YouTube, or it could be grabs from a CD from a lending library, much like Nandu's. Consider this being done in a room between 10 people. Now change the amplitude. Consider it being done in a room open to the street, with the door open and an invitation to anyone to come in and create a script, watching the movie with many others, with its sound off, the visuals running. Here I'd like to show you a rescript of a segment of Godard's Weekend done by the Ensemble for their forthcoming book. Text says, "What if I were to start looking for something here to take to the recycling market? What if this is preparation for an audition? A poet is singing from his book. No, it's the day of an auction. Stories have cast off their costumes and are putting together new ones. Everyone has come here to escape the beginning and end of things. Will an image of the storm that has passed be glimpsed in a storm that is yet to come?" The digital Autodidact produces the Open Rescripting Studio, a place that takes the cultural materials around and transforms them to produce a new way of looking at the world. The digital has opened up a generative space, and simultaneously, the digital has deepened the pressure of being observed and enumerated at the level of daily life through the digitization, accessing, and linking of documents of self, habitat, and work. The first day of a survey to enumerate. One team has come to a neighborhood and has surveyed 20 houses in half an hour. As the survey proceeds, however, it takes each surveyor, on an average, 1 week to survey 20 houses. The neighborhood enmeshes the surveyors into its weave, substantially slowing them down, disallowing them from moving through the neighborhood at their initial planned speed. Nobody will tell the surveyors where a workshop ends and a residence begins, where a residence ends and a shop has begun, where what appears to be a courtyard is still a lane. Even if a surveyor will ask, he will face various forms of evasions and denials. Throughout the survey, the neighborhood not only fends off the eye of the state, but mobilizes enormous cultural and intellectual resources by which it disallows the eye of the state from becoming its own eye. A deep contest that engulfs the survey process can be understood as a fine balance between what many inhabitants call its capacity of pardedari, which is to keep a veil over things on the one hand, and on the other, the survey's attempt to make pardarshi or transparent. This contest and this arrival by the neighborhood to what we may tentatively propose as negotiated illegibility, while in the process of being unveiled through an extensive door-to-door survey, can also be seen as a conflict between contending imaginations of urban life. It's not just the future of individual inhabitants of the neighborhood, but the very question of what will a neighborhood of the coming times be, which is at stake. Are there things, lives, people that still refuse to come into the ledger? There is a 55-year-old woman who is known in the neighborhood as Jagat Appa, elder sister to the world. She's been midwife to many births. She doesn't have any documents on her own name. With the neighborhood, she has always maintained pardedari, kept a veil over her complicated marital life. It's not that the neighborhood doesn't know, but they don't know from her. During the survey, the neighborhood did not intervene to ask the surveyors to do the survey in her, not her husband's name. The reality of an impending loss in the future does not displace the mutuality of pardedari, veil, that the neighborhood and Jagat Appa have maintained between each other over the years. The autodidactism that the ensemble proposes is not one which produces testimonies and biographies unentangled by the dominant forms of recounting. It is alive to the contests that a life negotiates. It is cautious of and has resources to stand before the formidable forces of enumeration and governance that want to know in certain prescribed, clear, legible, and readable ways. These forces of enumeration and governance could be the hard edge of the state and could be the soft, welfare-oriented, policy-driven research initiatives. This is where the digital needs to be understood as an internally unstable situation that is being contested everywhere. Our autodidact draws from the digital and its possibilities, and she contests too how the enumerative capacity of the digital is deployed in her life and its extensions. It is from this understanding that the ensemble proposes the challenge, and I quote from a forthcoming book by the ensemble. The challenge is to think and write from within the possible collision that may occur between the force with which you are moving towards something and the force that is traveling towards you. This collision is about sensing the force within the sediment of the enigmas, mysteries, challenges, and relationships of a place, and battling with yourself, with how you think about that place, the lens through which you see it, your knowledge, your body language, your formed and settled imaginations. To end, can the space of the digital be seen? Can the space of the digital, as seen by the ensemble through the figure of the autodidact, be seen as a site of excess, overflows, interruptions, accidents, routine and unpredictable encounters? It is here that the ensemble draws us to a striking image of the street as a possible way to comprehend the way the digital could be thought. And I end with this quote. To build thought from that which joins people, things, and places is to blur the lines that separate places and relationships and wake up to the vibrations of life it is possible to live in this world. Every presence on the street adds to what the street is, to what we are. Streets extend the possibilities of what we can be. Here I am that which I do not know I am, and also that which I may never again be. Thank you.